I have the 10 straddle on the button, look down at ace king off. Pretty powerful hand, hoping to play a big pot, and more than that, hoping to win a big pot. There's 5 limps before the cutoff decides to make it $100. He started the hand with about $12.50 or so, and I have him covered. I decide that's too little to play. We're going to want a 3-bet here with ace king. It's a really strong hand. It's a lot of dead money in the middle. If we take it down pre, happy days. If we go heads up to a flop, we probably have a better hand. So we make it 300 to go, and just the cutoff calls. Flop comes queen 7-2 with 2 spades. So we've 2 overcards, but we also have the ace of spades. So any spade turn will give us enough flush draw. So with this combo, I think with our whole range here, we're going to want to bet. We're probably going to choose a pretty small size. I decide to bet 175 and he calls. And we drill the turn. Comes the ace of clubs, giving us top pair, top kicker. Very happy with our hand now. There's $1,007 in the middle. He checks it on over to us and I bet 275. Going to continue here with a small size, and we want to get stacks in by the river. We don't need to jam. We can just keep betting small, try keep them in the pot. So we decide 275. It's just under 1/3 pot, and he decides to jam his remaining 775. We snap call. River comes the 8 of clubs. He tells me an ace is good, so I turn over my hand. He says it's the winner, and we scoop almost a 2.5k pot. Since the 10 became mandatory, there's been some pretty monster pots at the table, and this one's going to be no different. Folds round to the button, who makes it 35, and we look down at 6-7 of diamonds in the big blind. Usually I would choose a 3-bet here out of position, but for the reason we gave earlier, we're happy to call, let the action player come along. So we just peel. Action player decides that's too cheap for me to play and bangs it up to 140 to go. Button calls, and we're going to come along as well for the ride. Think this is a nice hand, especially multi-way. It's going to play pretty nice on certain flops. It's going to be easy to play, and if we hit our hand, we can win some pretty big pots. So 140, we'll come along and see a flop. 3 ways to the flop comes down Jack 10-2 with 2 diamonds. It's 420 in the middle. We flop a flush draw, and the original raiser leads out for 180. Button calls, and we have a pretty easy call here. If we hit our flush, we'll probably hit a monster pot. If we don't, we have a pretty easy check fold. Feeling lucky, we toss the chips in and go off to a turn. We hit the gin turn, it comes the queen of diamonds. We now make our flush. He bets 450. We're loving life at this stage. He has a lot of strong hands here. Ace king now makes a straight. He has all the sets, 10s, jacks, queens that raise are all going to have sets. So when it gets back to us after button folds, I think we can do nothing else here but stick it in. We've only 883 total left in our stack. His bet is 420. Don't think he's ever bluffing. Don't think he's ever folding for such little more. There's so many good hands here. He has us beat the odd time with some ace king of diamonds, some ace x of diamonds, but that's very, very rare. We're very happy to get the money in, and he pretty much snap calls us. River comes to 7 of hearts, and we turn our flush over. He mucks, says you're good, and we win a pretty monster pot of 2.6k. There's an undergoing straddle on to 10. The hijack raises to 40. Cut off calls. The button calls, and I look down at pocket 8s in the big blind. We have an easy call here, hoping the flop is set, and that's exactly what happens. First hand, and we flop a set straight away. Flop comes ace jack 8 with 2 hearts, so we flop bottom set. There is a flush draw and plenty of straight draws out there, so we check it back to the initial raiser, and he fires out a bet of $50. Really small bet, quarter pot. I wouldn't expect him to have too many really strong hands here. If he had a hand like ace king, I would expect it to bet a lot bigger. It gets called by the cutoff and called by the button, so we can't be going 4 ways to a turn here with bottom set. There's a lot of terrible cards for us that can come on the turn. Any cards that complete a straight, we have the best hand here more than likely, so we're going to raise it up, start getting some value for our set right now. We raise it up to $260. Could maybe go a bit bigger considering there's 4 players in the pot, but it's a bit over 5x. And to our surprise, every player in the pot wants to see the turn. The initial raiser calls, the cutoff calls, and the button calls. So we're going 4 ways to a turn. We're hoping it's a blank. We really don't want to see a heart or any card that completes a straight, a 7, a 9, a queen, a king. So a lot of bad turn cards for our 8s. But what happens is we get one of the best turn cards in the deck. It comes down to 3 of clubs, an absolute blank. If we're ahead now, we're still ahead. There's 12.50 in the middle. We've only 6.60 behind. There's nothing else we can do when we have half pot behind. We're sticking it in the middle, hoping a couple of people call off with some draws and they all have each other's outs. Gets back to the initial raiser. He thinks for a couple of seconds, flicks in one chip to make the call. Cutoff now goes into the tank. After a couple of seconds, he decides to let it go, and the button also goes into the tank. Says he's thinking of gambling, but eventually decides on a fold instead. So now there's 2.570 in the middle. We're going to a river. We reckon we probably need to fade a heart. Initial raiser can definitely have a lot of ace x of hearts. If you had ace king, ace queen of hearts, you had top pair and no flush draw, which I wouldn't expect to go anywhere. So we're more than likely have the best hand here. I would have expected aces and jacks to bet bigger on the flop. So in my eyes, we have the nuts. River comes down another 8 to give us quads. Happy days. We turn over our hand.
Oh my god.
And he turns over pocket aces. So we were so dead on the turn. We only had one out. We were 2% with one card to come, and we hit our miracle card when we didn't even realise we needed to hit it, which is crazy. Such a sick B for the aces. We look down at a pretty nice hand here. King, queen of spades and the cutoff. We're going to open it up to $20. The small blind calls and the big blind decides to 3-bet to $140. Pretty big size, but it's what you'd expect out of the big blind, especially with the caller. We're pretty deep. He starts the hand with about 1560. So pretty standard 300 big blinds deep to go bigger. We have just a pure call here with king, queen of spades. The small blind gets out of the way. The flop comes down 10 of hearts, 4 of spades, jack of spades. So we flop an open ender and the second no flush draw. Probably the best flop we could ask for without making a made hand. He continues for $150 and I think we're just going to call here. He's going to have aces, kings, queens. He can also have some sets that he's going to continue on this board for the big sides. But we have a ton of equity here. We can make some pretty strong hands and play a pretty big pot when we hit them. So we're just going to call. The turn comes 2 of spades, giving us the second nut flush. He bets out 250. Absolute dream spot for us here to make the second nuts in a big 3-bet pot. This pot's already pretty massive. There's 850 in the middle when he puts out the 250. So we want to raise here and start shoveling money in the pot and try get stacks in. We raise up to 625. He thinks for a few. Eventually shoves in his remaining $1,260. So yeah, sometimes we might lose to a better flush. It's mainly just going to be the ace 10 of spades or some ace x of spades. But we block a lot of the best spades. So not very likely we're behind. He could just have an overpair. Say aces with a spade makes a lot of sense. Kings with a spade sometimes. But I think he should call these hands more. But he could be more inclined just to rip them in. But we're pretty happy to stick in the call here. River comes to 10 of diamonds. So all sets now make a bow. Usually this would be a scare card, but I wouldn't expect him to shove jacks or 10s on the turn when I raise. I think when the flush comes in, he'd be more inclined just to call with these hands. He might shove them sometimes, but I think we don't need to be as worried about the board pairing as much as we usually would. We turn over our hand. He says it's good. He says he had a lower flush, which is a pretty sick cooler. So this hand, under the gun opens to 50, which is 5x, it's a pretty big raise. The hijack calls, and I look down at the cowboys on the book. This could be a nice hand to get us back in the even books. We 3-bet it to 195, and both players call. The flop comes down 9-4-4 with 2 spades, there's 600 in the middle. Under the gun checks, the hijack checks, and we have a clear continue for value with our overpair here. I'd expect to have the best hand here a lot of the time. I'm not really worried about a 4. I don't think under the gun when he opens 5x and calls should have any 4s. Maybe the odd time he has 8-4 suited or 4-5 suited. But when he opens to 50, when in other pots he was opening to 35, I think we might be able to exclude them hands. The hijack is the most likely out of all three of us to have a 4, but we have a clear continue here when they both check to us. We bet 225, just over a third pot. Under the gun calls and the hijack folds. So now we're really liking the situation because given what I said about the open size before, if we read into that he might have a stronger hand than usual, given he 5x'd under the gun, I think it's a lot likely now that he can have a hand like 10s, jacks, queens, which we're going to continue to get value unless a scare card comes on the turn. He can also have some worse flush draws, even though we have the king of spades. So pretty happy now with this situation heading to the turn. Turn now comes the 8 of clubs. It's 1100 in the middle, so we're going to be hoping to get our stack in by the river. I don't think I just want to overbet jam, because I think he might get away from a hand like pocket 10s if we just rip. So we decide to bet $400. He doesn't think that long before sticking us all in for our remaining ships. So we've invested over half our stack into the pot here. The 8 of clubs shouldn't change too much on the turn, and even a hand like 9-8 suited we still beat now because there's 2 4s on the flop. So the hands I think he shoves are going to be maybe an ace-4 suited that called, a 5-4 suited, but by that I don't think he has too many 4s. He could have pocket 9s, but I would expect 9s at some frequency to just call the turn because he wants to let me continue to hang myself if I am bluffing. So I wouldn't expect 9s to raise too much, but I can't be sure. Then he can also have some flush draws, maybe a hand that picked up more equity on the turn. If he had a hand like 10 jack of spades, queen jack of spades, 6-7 of spades, hands that pick up straight draws to go with their flush draw, these are definitely candidates he might rip because he knows he can get fold from, if I'm bluffing with ace king or ace queen, hands that are ahead of his say 10 high or jack high flush draw, he can get them to fold, which is a really good result for his hand. So given all these factors, I think we just have to call here. We can find so many hands that we're beating. There's not that much tick value that we're losing to it. Yeah, sometimes we might be beat, but I think we just need to put the money in and see what happens. River comes an offsuit 3 and he turns over pocket 9s for a flop full house. There's an early position raise to €20 before we look down a queen 10 of diamonds in middle position. The villain in this hand is a recreational player, so we want a 3-bet here and play the hand heads up versus him, so we make it €60 to go. Patrick has different ideas. He's coming for that money back after the 4-3 offhand and decides to 4-bet to 125. The original raiser gets out of the way and we can never fold to this sizing. We're going to call and hope that we hit a nice flop. We make the call and we're going heads up in a 4-bet pot. We're battling once again and the flop comes down. Pretty good one for queen 10 of diamonds. It comes 9-5-4 with 2 diamonds. So we have 2 overcards and a flush draw. We check it over to the aggressor and he fires out a c-bet of €75. We're going nowhere with this draw. We make the call and the turn comes a very good card. Comes the jack of clubs, which now gives us an open-ended straight draw to go with our flush draw. We check it on over to him again and he fires out a turn bet of €200. He's about 1,000 behind and we have a decision here. Do we want to check raise as a bluff or do we want to call? In game, I think we were getting out of line and we end up deciding that we're going to just check jam on him, put all his 1-pair hands in the blender. We can have some strong hands here like pocket 9s, pocket jacks. We have the 2 combos of jack 9 suited. We're also going to have 4-5 suited sometimes here. So we do have some strong hands and we can put a lot of the overpairs in the blender. We also can get some better hands to fold that are maybe like king queen of clubs, a hand that like picks up a draw and then doesn't want to play for the whole stack. They're not going to gamble with just 1 card to come, but maybe that's just being a bit ambitious. There's not that many combos of that hand, so we end up sticking him all in for his remaining €1,000 and get the bad news when we get snap called. He turns over pocket jacks for a turn set. We're never bluffing that hand. He has the nuts. Unfortunate to run into it. We decide to run it twice. We still have 2 chances to hit a flush or a straight. Maybe we can get a chop. Dealer does us no favours. 2 blanks on both boards and Patrick gets us back. It's his turn to send us to the showers. We end up losing a massive pot there. I think maybe there's an argument for just check calling the turn, especially with it being a 4-bet pot. I think if it's just a 3-bet pot, maybe where we can have more better hands where we can have more of the sets and stuff, maybe that's when we want to just check pile. But you know how we like to play. We like to put people under pressure. We don't like folding. We don't like playing passive. We want to put people to the test all the time. We tried it there and unfortunately ran into the nuts.
Good lad, in fairness to him. He's alright.
There's a limp of 10 in middle position and we make it 50 to go on the button. The big blind decides to 3-bet 200 bucks. It's 4xr raise. The big blind is essentially the small blind this hand because the straddle is on, so I wouldn't say it's as tight as a big blind 3-betting range would be, but I think we have an option between 4-betting or calling. I think 100 bigs deep, this is always going to be a 4-bet. I think we're close to 200 bigs deep here. We start the hand with $1,900. So I think we can mix in some calls. I think the benefits to mixing in some calls is that if we 4-bet, he's going to know that's a pretty tight range and it allows him to fold a lot of the bluffs that he 4-bets with. Don't think he'd 5-bet a hand that isn't aces or kings this deep. So I think sometimes calling here can be nice because it allows him to flop some top pairs with some ace x that he 3-bets. I'd imagine he's nearly 3-betting probably all suited aces here. So I think having ace king here, it's nice as a call sometimes. So we decide to call. We go heads up to a flop. Comes down a good one. Comes ace queen 5 with 2 spades and 1 club. So we have top pair, top kicker here. Pretty happy with our hand. Our hand's going to be slightly disguised when we just call. We're pretty much at the top of our range here. I don't think he'll put us on a hand as strong as ace king. This is a board I'd expect him to probably see bet 100% of his range. And that's exactly what he does. He bets 160 into a pot of 420. We have a decision here. I think we can raise for value sometimes here with top pair, top kicker on this board. I think calling is also going to be fine. So we go with the latter option in the end. We decide just to call and the turn comes to 5 of diamonds. Board now reads ace queen 5-5. So it means all aces that aren't ace king and ace queen are now chopping. Because if he had say ace 5, the difference between ace 5 and ace 10 now is nothing. They both have a pair of aces, pair of 5s and a queen. So he barrels 375 into a pot of 740. I think we have the same decision here. I think calling is probably our best option again. We're at the top of our range here. Our hand is slightly disguised. He's going to probably be doing a lot of bluffing on this board. I ran it through a sim after a good friend of mine, Johnny McCullough, tournament crusher from Ireland, so shout out Johnny. He was kind enough to run the sim for us after the hand, and we found that 200 bigs deep, ace king mixed in a call and a 4-bet, so the call pre was fine. And on the turn, he should be doing a lot of overbetting here as he has a big range advantage. So when you bet 375, I think we just have a pretty standard call here again. We're likely to have the best hand. You can still have a lot of bluffs. We're unlikely to be behind that often, so I don't think we do anything else but just call. River comes to jack of clubs. Does complete the straight. One of the hands I'd expect him to be bluffing with is king 10 suited. We do block one of the kings, but if he does have a bluff like king 10 suited, he's now got there. I think don't expect him ever to be barreling jacks as a bluff twice, so I think we can rule out a set of jacks. I think he would also have king jack suited that is bluffing, and now he rivers third pair, which he probably knows isn't going to be good. So I'd expect to see him bet here, and he decides to stick us all in for the rest of our remaining chips. We don't think that long. I think our hand is just a call. When we check the solver after, the solver just calls. It actually folds all ace king with a spade and calls every other ace king. We don't have a spade here, so this is just a call. We put in the call. We get shown the bad news. He's ace queen for flop 2 pair. Takes the stack. Nearly a 4k pot. That's the difference between up 2k or being down 2k for the day. In this hand, we're in the cutoff. The hijack raises to $75. We look down at pocket 10s. Player in question doesn't usually play hold'em, usually plays very high stakes PLO. We've seen him show down a couple of loose calls and 3-bet pots. He's not afraid to battle. I've seen him call with 7-5 suited, so we're going to 3-bet this up here. We make it $225 to go. He makes the call. He's not afraid of the battle, so we're going heads up to a flop. with pocket 10s, and it comes down 9-7-6 with 2 diamonds. We do still have an overpair, but it's definitely a dangerous flop. He could have some 2 pairs and some sets, but pocket 10s isn't a hand we're going to want to check back here. It needs a lot of protection. There's a lot of bad overcards that can come on the turn, so we fire out a c-bet of $175. He flicks in the call pretty quickly. The turn now comes another 6 pair in the bottom card. Kind of a good card in the sense that it does, if he did have a hand like 9-7, we do now beat that 2 pair. I think he also can have some 6s, but there's not that many of them left. He can definitely have a bunch of draws, but we're going to want to keep betting for value for the same reason as before. We definitely don't want to see some overcards roll off. He can have some overcards with some flush draws, so we fire out a bet of €275. He goes into the tank for a few before eventually check raising to €875. This is virtually an all-in sizing because we have 1100 back, so it's basically 900 and we've 200 behind, so it's basically putting us all in. So now we have a decision to make here. Do I think this player is capable of bluffing the turn? The answer is yes. I think they also know we're not going to have any 6s when they should have some 6s, so if they did have a draw, they're more than likely going to use this as a card that they'll attack us with on the turn. I think it's a good turn card to put in big check raises. It's going to put a lot of our hands in tough spots. They're repping essentially some full houses, but I think a decent amount of the full houses might also just check call, and obviously some of them are going to check raise and some 6s. So with pocket 10s here, I think maybe we would have wanted to have a bigger overpair to make the call, but in game we ended up leveling ourselves into thinking that he's going to have enough bluffs here, and we're just going to stick the rest in, because if we call, we've 200 behind, there's thousands in the pot, it's basically an all in anyway. So we decide to go all in and get snap called. Probably not the best news, but any hand that he raises is not folding for 200 more, so we're hoping it's a big combo draw that we're still ahead of. But we get the bad news when he turns over 5-6 suited for turn trips. In this hand, I look down at pocket 9s in the cutoff. I open it to €20. Patrick makes a 60 on the button before the small blind decides to rip all in for his last €136. The big blind then decides to do something weird. He goes into the tank for a minute or two and decides to just call. Found this kind of interesting as he'd been playing very snug all day, so I actually thought this might be a stronger hand than usual. If it was someone who was just playing a lot of pots, they could just be gambling with a whole wide range of stuff, but given he was playing really snug and then just cold calls the 4-bet all in, started to set off some alarm bells. But I don't think we're ever folding here. The chance of us getting 4 or 5-bet behind is quite low, so we're going to just call here and see a flop. We make the call and Patrick calls on the button, so we're going 4 ways to a flop here. There's one player already all in, €544 in the middle, and it comes down an absolute gin flop. Boom shakalaka, we flop a set. Comes 10-9-2 rainbow with 1 club. We flop middle set. This is an absolute dream scenario here. There's 1 player all in, there's still 3 of us betting on the side, and we have just essentially made the nuts. Big blind now leads out for $250, a half pot bet. Now I really think he has a strong hand because there's no incentive to bluff at this pot. If you have a hand with no showdown value, if you bluff the 2 of us out of the pot, you still need to beat the all-in player to win the pot. So given that there's no incentive to bluff, him firing out a bet at $250 here looks really, really strong. So we've 2 options here. Do we want to raise or do we want to call? I think given that we have such a strong hand here, there's not that many bad turns for us. We do have a player behind on the button. I think calling makes sense. Keep the 2 other guys in the pot and hopefully we can stack 1 if not 2 players. So we make the call and Patrick makes the call behind. So there's 3 of us now going to the turn. There's €1,294 in the middle. This pot is bloated up. It's absolutely massive. And it comes to king of clubs, bringing in a flush draw, and queen jack does now get there. But if we lose to queen jack, so be it. The big blind now decides to go all in for his last €1,100. Gets to me, we have no option here but to just rejam. We have him covered by about 300. There's no point calling now. The jig is up. So we rejam our stack. The button gets out of the way. Big blind player asks, do we have queen jack? I say no. We have a set. He asks, do you want to run it twice? I say sure. I never choose in these situations. My logic is I just let the other player choose. If they want to run once, they run one twice. I'm happy to do whatever. The big blind shows pocket aces. The original all-in player shows pocket four. So we've both players crushed. We only going to lose to an ace on the river. He has 2 outs. The dealer gives us 2 rivers. Both are blanks. We hole and scoop an absolutely massive pot. You'd love to see it. Just flop middle set and stack 2 players. We start this hand with about €1,600 and look down at the best hand in poker. Pocket aces on the button. Under the gun makes it 60 to go before under the gun 1 re-raises to $215. We're loving the look at this. We're sitting there with pocket aces on the button. We're going to 4-bet here and we raise to €490. Folds back around to the original raiser and they decide to put out a 5-bet to €850. This is getting wild here. We're struggling to contain our excitement. There's nothing better than when you have pocket aces and there's just tons and tons of raises going in before the flop. Under the gun 2 decides to shove all in, gets back to us and there's nothing we can do except stick in the rest of our stack. It's looking like it's going to be a 3-way all in here and we have the best hand in poker. We go all in before the player under the gun decides to fold and shows pocket kings face up. So shout out Tom, that's a sick fold. I've never folded pocket kings in my life, so to make a fold with the second best hand in poker pre-flop and be good is absolutely insane. It's so impressive. We still have to beat one other player here. We have the best hand. We decide to run it twice, so let's see if we can hold.
That's all I ever say to the pocket.
That's not he, Andrew.
So you have to be blogger or something. I'll what is that?
How much did you have behind the when you asked it?
1500.
Well, it means licked at the fold.
1475.
That's the fold.
6 a bit less.
We're absolutely buzzing to scoop nearly a €4,000 pot. This is absolutely massive. It's like 6k in Canadian dollars. Biggest pot of the vlog so far, and we didn't even get the full value. What a fold from Kings. Very impressive. Well played, Tom.